Hey guys, Jeffrey from Headstrong Training Systems here. So today we're going to be taking a look at game day handling. So basically, you've put in all the hard work, your athlete's done the training, and now you've come to competition day and you need to handle your athlete. So what are some things that you guys should be considering, and how to make sure that you guys go in and have the best day possible? So the best advice, that kind of just broad advice I can give, is to go in with a plan. You don't want to be going to there winging it and having to come up with attempts and timings on the spot. You always want to have a plan set up before, like even just having it on a spreadsheet that you can take that plan into comp with you and physically be able to look at it and refer back to it when needed. And you want to make sure that you have this plan that you've consulted with your athlete. So it's the attempt selections, timings, warm-ups to take that it's all been sorted and it's all set up in a way that both parties are confident and comfortable with it. So the two key areas that you want to plan out first are basically your timings and your warm-ups. You want to and your attempt selections. So when I talk about warm-ups, basically you want to figure out with your athlete what jumps you'll be taking reaching up to your last warm-up and before you step onto the platform for your opener. So this would be like your bar sets, the set after that, and then the last warm-up. You essentially, but the reason you want to do this is you want to figure out how long you're going to be in the warm-up room for, so that you can basically plan ahead and know when on the day where you can figure out when to take your warm-ups and to plan it out accordingly, so that when it comes time for you to step up onto the platform, you've been able to get all of the warm-ups out of the way and you haven't had to rush, and that there's ample time and there's not too much time and there's not enough time between your last warm-up and the time that it takes for you to step out onto the platform. So by knowing how many warm-ups you need and how long it takes on the day, when you find out what time you'll be lifting and what time you'll be stepping onto the platform, then you can work back on the day and fit in the times. Now, the other area that you want to look at is basically your attempt selections. You want to go in with a plan of what your opener is going to be, what your second attempt will be, and what your third attempt will be. Later on in the video, I'm going to go more in depth about how to plan these attempt selections. But right now, I'm just gonna talk in this section. I'm just gonna talk about why it's so important to have your attempt selections there ready, so that the reason for that is after your athlete performs a movement, then performs each attempt, that when it goes back to you, you already know, you have an idea in your head of what jumps can be taken and what jumps are in a good range, because that way you don't have to manipulate and adapt on the spot. That way you already have a plan that you can work off, so that it reduces stress for both you and the athlete, and it also takes into account all the possible variables. And what I mean by that is, say for example, if you know a particular variable is true for your athlete, as in they can only take larger jumps, or that they can't take as big jumps as most people do, then your plan accounts for all of that, so that you don't make any knee-jerk reaction changes on the day that will in fact throw you off. Like for example, you might see the lift move really fast and you might take a bigger jump, but then when you're in a calmer state setting up your plan with your athlete, you guys both realize that this athlete can't take bigger jumps, that they are more of an explosive and snappy lifter, so that's set out in the plan. So set up your plan and stick to it. So now what I've got set up here for you guys to take a look at is basically just a very basic spreadsheet that I used to use with game day handling. Basically, you guys will see that when you're setting up the plan to go in, that you would ideally like to have, you basically put in the warm-ups, the weight that you'll be taking. I leave this side empty. Basically, that's when you figure out what time the athlete will be lifting. That's where you'll put in the time of where each warm-up should occur. But basically, you can see for your squat, your bench, and your deadlift, you basically put in the warm-ups you'll take, how many reps and at what weight, and then you also put in your planned openers, second attempts and third attempts, with also a range. So a range either side of, say if the taper went well, or if any variables are occurring on the day, that's when you adjust. So basically, this is a filled-in comp plan of a comp that's already happened. You can see that basically moving in, we had the warm-ups there. These were pre-planned. Warm-ups for squat, bench, deadlift, and then for the weight, how many reps, and then the openers as well. Opener, second attempt, third attempt, with a range for the jumps that we would take. Now, the next area I want to talk about is your attempt selection. So when you're setting up to work out your plan, how do you figure out what your opener should be, what your second attempt should be, and what your third attempt should be? Now, so there are obviously changes and differences for every athlete depending on the situation of the competition. But broadly speaking, when you're selecting your opener, there you have to consider the variables of the athlete. Is this the first comp that they're ever doing, or is this a competition where they're trying to compete? They're trying to podium and they're trying to compete for placing, or is this just a competition that they're looking to do for fun? Basically, when you take in all these variables, you have to use the context to shape your attempt selection. For example, if this is like the first comp athlete is doing it, then you might look to lower the openers, just because there are always variables that you can't account for, as in like impact of spectators, things won't go your way, you don't know how the judging is, how the refereeing is, how strict they are, not hitting depth. So with your openers, and in squats in particular, because that's essentially the first movement, this is I just want to quickly say that this is in regards to a more novice athlete going into their first couple competitions. I tend to drop my squat opener more than bench and deadlift, just because it's the first movement that they're of their first exposure to the lifting environment and the judging. And so the problem is, you can always take, so not a problem, but the idea is you can always take bigger jumps. You would always rather to take a bigger jump into your second and even into your third than risk a very grindy first opener, that basically, because the problem with that is it would disrupt your momentum and it'll disrupt the flow and confidence that you're feeding. You'd rather be your opener for a more novice lifter should always be a way that you can confidently hit physically and mentally, and even drop that a bit more just to account for any external variables. And then your second attempt is basically you're trying to sit it at about maybe an 8 RP. That weight should still move pretty well, because you want to keep building confidence and keep building momentum into the third attempt, where you might be looking at be able to grind a bit more. Now, when you look to select your attempts, if we continue to look at this spreadsheet that we set up, basically you want to leave, if you want to take into account what you're doing. And so when you're looking to figure out your second attempt, if you've dropped your opener a bit more, just to account for any variables, then you might take a bigger of a jump into your second attempt. But then you don't want to take too big of a jump, because then if you eat into your second attempt and the second attempt becomes too close to the third attempt, then you're pre-fatiguing yourself before going to the third. So the second attempt is kind of like a mid-between. You don't want it to be too close to your opener, because then you have to take too big a jump to your third. But then also you don't want it to be too close to your third, where then you have to take I have to take a very small jump, and you already pre-fatigued yourself. So the second attempt kind of looks to act as your in-between. And then your third attempt is basically your top end range strength based off past training data, the predicted 1RM that you're predicting your athlete is able to hit. You're kind of sitting around that weight with a range either side, and that just is based off how performance is going on the day, if other variables lining up, and how they responded effectively to the taper. A couple key considerations that I also want to talk about is key differences between the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. Obviously, there are also gender differences, as in that you need to consider. But usually with the squat, you would take in kilos, you maybe take around 7.5 to 10 or even 12.5 kilo jumps between attempts. If this is an athlete that can handle those kind of bigger jumps, but you usually take bigger or moderate sized jumps on squats. On bench, this would obviously have to be pulled back, because we know with the upper body, you can't handle those jumps as well. So with a female lifter, you might only be looking at 2.5 to 5 kilo jumps, and with a male lifter, maybe say 5 to 7.5. So it's very important to consider the movement differences of each lift. And with deadlifts, you will always look to take bigger jumps, maybe even 15 to 20 kilo jumps, just because it's such a fatiguing movement that if you took too much top end range back to back to back, you're going to fatigue yourself very highly. So that's kind of how I would plan out my openers, second attempts, and third attempt selections. And you guys can also see here that there's also a range. So there's a range either side of the second or third attempts, basically just to prepare for any scenarios, prepare for whatever possibilities might occur on the day, and that way you're not panicking that if something goes wrong, you're not panicking, you don't pull back too much, or you don't pull back enough, that there's a plan, you just stick to the plan. So the next topic area I want to talk about is on the day. So on the day, I'm going to kind of brush past the general stuff like making sure your athlete has their rack numbers, making sure that they're refeeding, hydrating. I'm going to brush past that general stuff, and specifically, I'm going to talk about making sure how to get your timings down for your warm up. So basically, if you in an ideal world, you'd probably be if you were say in the first flight, the first lifter. That's very easy to figure out because the lift off time, say lift off is at 9:30. If you were in the first flight, the first lifter, you can probably predict that you'll be up on the platform at 9:30. And if it takes you say maybe half an hour to warm up, you would probably start getting under the bar at 9 o'clock. You'll pull back half an hour. But say if you were in the second flight, flight B, or even in not the first athlete up, so you might be the 6th or 7th athlete up, how would you then time your warm-ups to make sure that when it's time for you to set up on the platform, so just go onto the platform and execute, that you've timed your warm-ups appropriately? And so how we do that is with a plan. Now you guys can see here on the day that, so basically this column here, I usually leave empty. So this is basically the timings of when I want my athlete to take their warm-ups, but you won't be able to fill that in until the day where you find out what time they're up. So what you do is, by having this column here of knowing how many warm-ups you do and kind of spacing out, so that based off how long an athlete needs to rest between attempts. So if you need an athlete that rests 6 minutes, in this case we can see that I think we rested 5 minutes here between the last one, the top end range strength, only about 4 minutes down the bottom there. Basically the amount of time you rest doesn't matter, it's about what your athlete normally does. But then on the days, you would basically put in the time that you ideally want to take that warm up by working back from the time of liftoff. So for example, if you were an athlete in the first flight, lift off at 9:30, but you were the 7th lifter to go up, as a general rule, I kind of allocate 1 minute between attempts just to take into account all the variables. So you would add on 7 minutes to lift off at 9:30. So you would estimate that the opener is being taken at 9:37, and then you would work back from that. So in this case, I put in the opener estimated time of 9:18. So you work back. So 9:18, if this is the time I estimate that they're on the platform, then you work back. So 5 minutes from that, at 9:13, that's when I want her taking her last warm up. 9:08. A warm up before that, 9:03, a warm up before that. So it's all about, as soon as you find out what time the athlete will be onto the platform, then you work back and you put in the times where you want to take each attempt, each warm up, just so that the process can be simplified, streamlined, and you're not hastily trying to figure out how long until the athlete needs to be up on the platform. If your athlete is in the second flight or even the third flight, that makes things a bit more tricky, because obviously the more athletes that go on, there's always fluctuations between timings. Say an athlete's faster on the platform or is slower, so the full 1 minute isn't used, or they're slower, that only 20 seconds is used. But the general rule still follows. You will look at how many athletes it takes until your athlete, so say if they're in the second flight, and you know that there's 13 people in the first flight, you would estimate that maybe 13 minutes for each attempt, and then there's 3 attempts, so open, second, third, you'll probably take about 39 minutes until your second flight. Then you look at where you are on the second flight. So if you're the first lift up, then you can estimate that it's to be 39 minutes from 9:30, where the original start time is, that your athlete is up. Or maybe if you're the 4th lifter, then it'll be 39 plus 4 minutes, 43 minutes from the opening start time of when that first flight stepped on. Obviously, as you get closer, you would keep doing your maths, your calculations on the day, just to kind of see where you're at and how accurate it is, because there's obviously changes. And what I like to do to help with that is, when I see the first people gone, I also time the amount it takes for them to execute the lift and average that out, just to take into account how long it takes spotters, loaders to change the weight between attempts. And so what I do is when the head ref first says bar is loaded, until the second time they say the bar is loaded for the next athlete, I'll time how long it takes between each attempt and average that out. And the final thing that I want to talk about are just kind of general ideas for on the day handling that people that often miss. I just want to talk about how important it is to essentially match the energy of the athlete, as in you want to provide support. You don't want to be an annoyance or hindrance to your athlete. If your athlete is a very hype lifter, they like to be up with their energy, then you want to match that energy. You don't want to feel like that you're a drain on them, or vice versa. If they're normally very calm and composed lifter, they just want to be in their own space. Just give them their space and let them do their thing, because at that day, it's about the athlete and their performance and not yours. You also want to be staying on top of all your athlete at all times, and what I mean by that is you always want to be usually know where your athlete is. You want to, if they've gone to the toilet, you want to know that they've gone to the toilet, so that you can kind of plan out if anything was to happen, you know where to go get them, you know where to find your athlete. You kind of want to guide them around the day. So if you know that now they finished their squats, they've got 40 minutes until you need to get them under the bar, let them know you've got 40 minutes until I need you to start warming up again. Just basically the idea of you handling on the day is you're guiding the athlete around. All the athlete has to do is lift when you tell them to lift and execute. That's all they need to do. They're handling, stay on top of things, knowing where your athlete is and knowing where your athlete needs to be. That should all be handled by you, and you should be on track on top of all those things. And finally, the last topic that I want to touch on is battling. So say you're going to a competition and you're looking at a podium and you know you've got your competition. Basically, what I found out is the most effective way of battling and knowing what numbers you need to pull, what numbers you need to put in based off that is just with a pre-calculated app. So basically in this sheet here, in this template of game day coaching, basically this is a template I've set up that allows me to put in the numbers my athlete is hitting and the numbers that the competition around is hitting, and that basically the calculator would tell me what the difference is and what numbers we need in order to beat them and secure podium. So say for example, if my first athlete squats 160 kilos, then you can see that the total is adjusted, that my athlete now has a total of 160, and the difference to beat the first competitor is that 160. We're ahead by 160. It's negative 160 because I haven't put a number, but say I put in 170 for them, then you can see that I need 10 kilos, that we're behind by 10 kilos, and we need 10 kilos to beat, and we're behind by 10. So basically this is kind of a spreadsheet that I like to use in order to stay on top of things. And basically the gist of this video is in terms of game day handling is just have a plan. If you have a plan and you know your plan works and you're confident in your plan, obviously there might be adjustments to be made based on the day. You never know what's going to happen on the day, but usually by having a plan that accounts for all these variables, then you should be set for the day. So that's all for me today, guys. Hopefully that was helpful for you, and I'll catch you guys next time. Take care.